Here, what I'd like to do is talk about 3 incidents that took place with heavy metal musicians and heavy metal bands that are a bit mysterious, a bit dark, and a bit unusual. So I want to point out right now that I'm not going to be talking so much about the content of music and lyrics. Right now, I'm just going to talk about 3 interesting incidents that involve odd, perhaps even mystical metal moments. And the first one has to do with the band Rainbow. When Rainbow made the album Long Live Rock and Roll, they were engaged in a lot of seances and spirit summonings and various parapsychological activities. They apparently came into contact with a spirit named Baal.
Long Live Rock and Roll, we did at a studio called the Chateau, and they made it a studio. It was a 14th, 15th century, right up Ritchie Street, right up the Band Street, really, an old manor home residency where you lived and did all the things. And there we went through, I think the most memorable thing about that album is all the occult things that we went through, because we went through a severe phase of contacting a spirit that was the most scary thing I think any of us have ever been through. We'd always dabbled before, certainly Richie did and I did, and we rose a spirit named Baal. So not to go into the whole thing, Baal is this really evil spirit whose name is on the album, on the Long and Rock Roll album. It says thanks to so on, thanks, like no thanks to Baal, who was really chaotic in, stopping this album. I mean, the tape machines would just suddenly stop on their own, doors that were locked that had only one key to one person whom we trusted would go up there and things would be playing. And
I'm involved in mystical things, yes. I'm aware of, for 20 years I've studied paranormal and not black magic. I'm talking about seances and communication with the spiritual realm.
So one of the interesting things about Baal is it's a demon that's well known in the occult. And you can go look it up, Google it or YouTube it and find out the history of it. So if the experiences recounted by Blackmore and Ronnie James Dio are accurate, then it seems that they had made contact with quite an archetypal and very well-known spirit who seemed to reveal itself to them in a trickster capacity if you listen to their stories. And in the occult, when demons form in a trickster capacity, it is because you are not on your right path. In this case, since the band broke up shortly after the album was made, perhaps the message of this psychic entity was, the bad vibes in the band were not good for music. My second black magic heavy metal moment comes from the grandfathers of heavy metal, Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath was going to make the album Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. They were in a point where they were no longer feeling all that creative. They were feeling as though they had reached a point with coke and alcohol and groupies and fame to where they were almost immobilized. They could no longer be the creative force that they once had been. And since they had contractual obligations, they started to worry about what they were going to do. Their solution was to book themselves into a spooky old place called Clearwell Castle, go down into the dungeon and attempt to come up with something. Well, while they were working in the castle, they did have a mysterious encounter with a apparition, as explained here by Tony Iommi.
We walked out down the passage, and there was an armory on the left as we walked down, on the right as we walked down, and we saw this figure coming towards us. And then go into this armory. And I thought, who's this guy? And so we went into this armory, Ozzy and myself. Of course there was nobody there, the door's locked from the inside at the other end. I was like, God, that's strange.
So after that incident, the band started to play jokes on each other to try to scare one another, and it worked so well that they began driving home every night to their houses many, many miles away from Clearwell Castle, only to come back in the morning each day and scare each other again. In fact, Bill Ward was rumored to have been sleeping with a dagger on the nights that he chose to stay in the castle. And Ozzy Osbourne is quoted as saying, "People like to call us the Lords of Darkness, but Lords of the Chicken Shit might be a better name for us considering how we responded to the vibes at Clearwell Castle." My third satanic heavy metal story involves Ace Frehley and his famous lease chase. This took place in 1983 when Ace Frehley was being chased down the Bronx River Parkway in a 1981 DeLorean going like 90 to 100 miles an hour until he was finally pulled over and charged with reckless and drunken driving. Now, he made a song about this that he didn't write, but nonetheless fit the incident quite perfectly, called Rock Soldiers. And he's also gone on record in many interviews saying that during the lease chase he had an encounter with the devil.
And some people don't even believe the devil exists. Unfortunately, he does. And it makes perfect sense. You can't have good if you don't have evil. That's the way the universe works. You can't have light unless you have darkness.
Well, listen, man, I gotta hit a break.
I've experienced the devil. I've had run-ins with the devil. You know, when I was on drugs and trying to kick him, I've experienced the devil. I felt the devil's presence. He wanted me not to get off the drugs, but thank God, God intervened, and this September 15th, I'll be sober 17 years.
So in this case, what you have is the devil appearing, or a demon appearing to Ace, causing a catastrophe in his life that then set him back on his correct path. So looking back over these three encounters, you find that that is a similar theme in each one of them. In the first encounter with Rainbow, the band, if you look into the history of that time, there's a lot of bad interpersonal stuff going on. There's a lot of drinking, a lot of drug use, just a whole lot of bad relationships and stuff. The band really needed to move on, and what we got from that was Ronnie James Dio's solo career, just for one thing. As far as Black Sabbath goes, they had lost the creative thread, and they were one of the greatest bands in the history of the world, so their encounter with these forces put them back on their inspired track, and they made one of the greatest albums in metal history. As far as Ace goes, it's clear that his encounter with the devil filled him with enough fear and wisdom to change his life right when he needed it. So, what are we to make of these encounters? Maybe a little, maybe a lot, maybe nothing at all. I personally like to think that the forces that exist in the mystical realities around us are, for the most part, encouraging of us, and I might like to talk about this in the future on some other videos, but right now I'd like to hear what you think. So if you have an idea about this or any other topic connected to classic or contemporary music, please leave a comment in the section below. Remember to like and subscribe. Thanks a lot.